أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد خاتم المرسلين والمبعوث رحمة للعالمين وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. This is Kharida al-Bahiya, Islamic Theology, lesson number 10. In today's lesson, inshallah, we have quite a few things to cover. We will be talking a little bit about some corporeal arguments, especially that we talked about the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially the sight and seeing, because this is used by those corporealists to advance an argument which from like the surface it seems very solid and good argument, but actually, as you'll see, it's very silly. So we're going to tackle that, although I think I already talked about it briefly last time, but I received some questions about it, so it seems that it needs a little bit like more elaboration, and that's great. I mean, good questions coming related and relevant to the topic triggers elaboration, sometimes triggers further explanation, so keep those relevant questions coming for sure. And then we will also follow up on the speech and kalam from what we talked about before, as well some more arguments and rebutting of argument, and that would lead us to talk about some of the rules that those corporeal sects invented. And by corporeal sects nowadays, I mean the Salafiyya, those Wahhabis, following of Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, Ibn Taymiyyah, and so on. So they advanced, or they invented many rules, but we're going to just tackle two of the most commonly used by them, just to see how they invent their own rules just out of convenience. And then we will continue with the poem directly. Now we're going to go back to the poem, the Kharida, and we'll talk about the opposite of what is necessary on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is impossible, and what is possible, what is impossible on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also that will lead us to talk about and rebut some of the principles of al-Mu'tazila in this regard. Right, so without further ado, let's get right to it. Starting with the fallacy of the argument that some corporealists will advance, saying, especially like building on the attributes of Sam' al-Basar, sight and hearing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So what they say is, we affirm sight and hearing to Allah. We have sight and hearing, and therefore there is a commonality between our sight, our hearing, Allah's sight, Allah hearing. It's in the essence of what hearing is and what sight is. There are some commonality. Allah's hearing and sight is totally is different, they say, than ours, but still there is some commonality. Likewise, because of that, why it is so wrong to say, similarly, we have hand. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also has a hand attribute, which is has a common meaning that we understand from the word hand, but his hand is different. Okay? And they say, okay, that doesn't make us corporeal, like we corporeal sect. We basically just building in the same way. I'm sure some of you must already heard this argument, and I addressed that briefly last lesson. So, but let's give it more elaboration. All right. So there are two sides of basically answering this fallacy. The first point is, there is no commonality whatsoever between any of our attributes or any of our existence and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are in the essence of what they are different. So the commonality is just verbal commonality. It's called, we call it basar here, we call it sight for us, we call it sight for Allah, but at the essence level of what they are totally different. There is no commonality there. So that's the first part. And to demonstrate this to you, let's just say, okay, we have three realms or world or whatever. So we have our world here, okay? Humans, animals, robots, machines, tools, whatever. And we can define those attributes or actions by the essence or by the effect of the attribute, or what we can see from the attribute. There is a malakut, the angels world, and there is a divine. Okay, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not in the world, he is not out of the world. But that question is inapplicable. I think we talked about that before. But anyway, that's a different story. Now we have our sight. We have an attribute called sight. We have that sight. Great. What is that sight? What does it do? It basically establish a relation. I think, as we talked about before, there's a relation between that attribute. It allows us to know and realize the object that we see. Okay, so it's basically just like the effect of it is a way of knowing that object in a way, realizing it in a way that is different than just purely information or raw information, for example, or so it's different than knowing or knowledge as a separate attribute, as we talked before. But anyway, it's at the end of the day, it's just basically knowing and realizing that object. So what is sight? What is our sight in the core of it? What is it? We know that. We can define it because we know how it works in us. We know that like in the core level, we can define that. And even we can define it for animals. We can define it for robots. Robot could see as well. Machines, there are machines that can see, toll-free or toll machines like vehicles, and you can go underneath them and they see the cars and whatever. And you can see that even though these all come, like at the end of the day, it's basically have more or less the same effect. The definition of the essence of these things might be different. Perhaps human and animals, there is a lot of similarities for sure, living beings, but robots and machine, the sight of robots is totally different than the sight of us, as at the essence of it. All right, so what about the malakut world, the angels? Okay, so they see as well, same effect. They basically, in some way, we don't know how or why or what exactly it is. They also realize that their sight to us is unknown. We cannot define it. At the level of its core, what is it? Okay, ما هي, what we call ما هي, حقيقة الشيء. What is it? At the essence, at the core of it, we don't know. Likewise, we don't know what is the basar of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The fact that there is a commonality about the effect here doesn't mean those sights are the same, right? They are not even the same here in this world. They are not the same with everything else that you can see or that can have such an attribute. And therefore, there is no commonality. The commonality, we call it sight, we call it sight, we call it sight in all of these instances, but they are different. Okay, so that's the first part. And in order perhaps to support that with some like other linguistic and even ayat, when Pharaoh asked Sayyidina Moses alayhi salatu wasalam, and what is the Lord of the world? What is it? He's asking about ma huwa wa ma rabbul alameen, the essence of it. What is the definition, the core definition, the haqiqah of Allah? What is it? Moses didn't reply. He cannot reply. He said, He is the Lord of the heavens, the earth, and everything in between. That's it. That's what you need to know. You cannot define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? And therefore, the essence of the that al-ilahiyya, that al-aliyya, the exalted essence, we don't know that. We don't know what it is. And therefore we don't know the attributes. So anything verbally, like in linguistic, it's basically just what we call mushtarak lafzi, common or verbal commonality. That's it. And this is not just between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is between us and a lot of other things. Like, for example, I think you would remember or you would know that There is nothing in paradise with similarity to this life except in what they are called. This is basically attributed, this statement attributed, I think, to Ibn Abbas. ليس في الجنة شيء مما في الدنيا إلا الأسماء. Some say it's hadith, but I think there are some talking about that, whether it is a hadith or not, but at least it's قول of Ibn Abbas, حبر الأمة. Also, in Arabic, we have the word ayn, ayn, and it has a lot of meanings. It means eye, it means spy, it means body of water, it means essence of something, a lot of other meanings. All of these meanings are different, but they have the same love, the same word. Okay, so that's what we call mushtarak lafzi. They are using the same word, but they are different in their essence. So therefore, we cannot define Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we cannot define his attribute. This requires us to know and understand fully, know his essence. But we can't, and we can't do that. We don't, and we can't. Okay, so that's the first part. The second part is basically, even let's assume that there is a commonality between our sight in the essence of it and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just let's assume that. Even if you assumed that, the basar, this attribute is a meaning. The meaning differs. There is it is not the same kind of tangible thing that, like you say, a hand or a leg or anything like that. And to understand that, let's talk a little bit about taxonomy. We will perhaps if we took, or inshallah in future, when we add to our, I think we have that in our plan, in our roadmap, to have a logic, traditional logic or mantiq class. And these some of the things that is going to be explained in detail there. But just so that you understand, when you define something by their essence, you look at what they are, what defines them. So if we talk about a body, for example, just a body, the body could be non-growing, it could be growing. Okay, it could be, if it is non-growing, could be solid, liquid, gas, whatever. Growing, it could be animal, it could be plant. Again, this is not exclusive or comprehensive by any chance. It's just for illustration. Okay, it's not even very, very accurate, but it's just to get you the idea of what I'm building up. I'm building up to. The animal could be rational animal, non-rational. The plant could be roots, above ground, whatever. Let's assume those like a kind of definition of what the plants are and what the animal are. For example, palm tree for plant, for rational animal is human. That's the definition of a human, rational animal. Non-rational animals, lion, sheep, all those kind of other animals, they are not rational. Rational meaning that they have a mind, they can think, and basically this is the aql, and thinking logically and so on, is one thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distinguished us with all the other all the other animals. Yeah, they reject logic, but they use it. That's a different story. All right. So basically, that is the definition, okay, of a human is rational animal. Lion is non-rational animal with other attributes that you can add to it in order to distinguish it from other animals and so on and so forth. Animal means, I'm not sure if you can see the questions, by the way. I'm under the impression you can see the question, but it seems that you can't. There was a question about Salafi reject the kulliyat and so on. That's a different story. Let's not get there now. We're going to confuse everybody. The other question, why we call or put humans being an animal. That's the definition, brother, of human. Human is an animal. Animal doesn't mean bad word necessarily. In this context, animal just means a body that is alive, that can move and grow. So basically, that's the definition. What is animal? Animal is growing body. Alive, for sure, okay? A plant is growing body as well. But this moves, these can't move. If you think about rock, a rock, solid, non-growing body, right? And so on. It's taxonomy. Anybody of you who took like taxonomy like classes, science classes, or biology or something like that, you'll be exposed to this kind of classification, some sort of another. But anyway, let's just move on. I mean, this is not needed or meant to be explained by itself. It's just building up to what I'm going to show you soon enough. So the point is, you can see if there is a commonality between anything in what defines them in their essence, what we call dhatiyat, what they are, in what they are, then there has to be common, what we call genus or class or something. Like here, for example, lion and human, they are both animals, okay? So now when we talk about human hand, we say human hand, monkey's hand, etc., whatever hand, foot, fingers, chin, all these, what they are, what is the definition of a hand? It's a body part. In its essence, all those things, they are all body parts. There is no hand, like a literal meaning of hand, unless it is a body part. That's what it is, the essence of it. Human hand, monkey's hand, whatever other animal hand, they differ. What they differ in? They differ not in their essence of being a body part. They differ in the modality, meaning what they look like, what material they are made of, the volume, the mass, does it have fingers or not, how many fingers, and all that kind of other further modality that you can add to it. But in essence, they are both body parts, okay? Even when you say like a kettle hand is still a part of the kettle, which you can like hold it from, and it's majaz anyway. So what they say, they actually add Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, hasha lillah here. They say like we have and actually I hear that many times from even their scholars, or what they call the scholar, their shuyukh. They say, likewise, I have a face. Somebody said that literally, but in Arabic. Human has a face. Donkeys have a face. What is the problem? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a face. Our face is not like the monkey. Allah's face, or not like the donkey. Allah's face is not like ours. See that it's a terrible parable, and every time I remember this statement, it just makes my blood boil really in my veins. It's, how can you address Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like that? How can you be thinking about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like that? It's very frustrating. But anyway, let's not get too emotional here. Sorry. It's difficult not to, but anyway, so they put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here. But anyway, if you say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, foot, finger, chin, whatever, all those kind of body parts, and they say those are body parts in the human, but they are attributes in Allah. And we affirm the literal meaning that the lay person understand. What is the literal meaning that the lay person understand? It's a body part. You cannot run out of that. You cannot not like negate that meaning. So if you affirm the literal meaning of a hand, you are affirming a body part. No way out of it. When you say not like ours or not like us, that doesn't change it. It's basically like, yeah, the monkey has a hand, human has a hand, but they are both body parts. So this is basically the definition of being mujassim, of being corporeal. That's what it is. You don't have to say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand that looks exactly like us, right? Nothing like him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means nothing is like him. Not that there is something like him, but in a different shape, form, or quality, or material, or whatever. Okay? I think you can see that now. I mean, if you affirm a hand, if you say there is a common part, or common in the essence of what it is, commonality between our hand and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hand, then no matter what you say, you directly affirm body part. Like here, it's the body part, done. So, as I said, also, even if, like, we talked about, the first part was the essence, the definition of what the attributes, our attribute and Allah attribute is, are the, like, sight and hearing. That definition is different. But even if we said, yeah, they are common meaning, it is a meaning. It doesn't result in being corporeal. It doesn't make it anthropomorphism, right? But by affirming a body part, that is tashbih. That is anthropomorphism. That's tajisim. That's corporeality. No way out of it. A question. So can we put jinn in there? I'm not sure which, like, in there where, but yeah, jinn in Ahl Sunnah, they are jism latif, they are jism nari, they are body. So they are one of the body. Okay? But that's like a different story. My point was not the accurate definition of everything now that we talked about. It's just basically by establishing commonality in the core of what something is. By definition, directly you affirm they have similarity, or they branch out from the same genus or class or something. So, for example, here, if you affirm hand or foot or whatever with anything else, they will have to branch out from being a body part, because that's what hand is, that's what a foot is, and so on. Now, I'm sure you heard many of them say that. They say, yeah, we affirm, right? I affirm a hand in the literal sense, but I don't know what it looks like. And some of them will say it is not a body part. So it is like saying, I affirm to Allah a body part that is not a body part. That's basically nonsense. But you will notice that most of their shuyukh, they avoid denying a body part. They will not say it. And then they will try to avoid it and say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't deny, didn't affirm. We cannot say. They just play around that and play games around that definition. But it's clear. And you can just ask them, all right, what is the meaning that you affirm? They will yell. They will yell at you, say, it's a hand. You don't know what a hand is? A hand. Everybody knows what a hand is. Right? Tell him, okay, the hand is a body part that is basically used by human to do such and such, whatever. It's a body part. Is that the name? Is that the meaning you are firm? You'll just be going with them in a loop. So at the end of the day, it's either you know the meaning or you don't know the meaning, which is exactly, or basically what the Ahl Sunnah way, the Asha'ira and Maturidiyya, the real Ahl Sunnah way. So it's either an attribute, but we are unable to determine what it is. It is not a physical, tangible attribute. It is a meaning attribute. So it means something else. What it is, we don't know. We know from the meaning attributes that we affirm: power, irada, will, and knowledge, all those. We know those. We can see in the Quran, Sunnah, and so on. We can basically affirm those. But a hand, what does it mean? We don't know. So you do delegation of the meaning. You basically say, all right, the meaning, its meaning as a body part is certainly not befitting for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And therefore, I negate that meaning, being a body part, a tool, like a jariha, or an organ. I deny that. That is not meant. It is not befitting to Allah. So what does it mean? I do not know the meaning of it. There's delegation, or the reinterpretation, which is ta'wil. You say, right, how the Arab used that word in other contexts, and you try to establish like an expression that is basically applicable to the ayah that we are talking about. And there are a lot of talking about the Salaf didn't do this, the Salaf didn't do reinterpretation, the Salaf didn't do blah, blah, blah. That's wrong. The Salaf did reinterpretation. Reinterpretation is nothing wrong with it. But when you find like a debate among scholars, the reinterpretation meant different things in their time. What the bad reinterpretation, when they criticizing reinterpretation, if that reinterpretation is out of the context, it's something that the Arab didn't use, then they reject that. But the reinterpretation, what we call now reinterpretation, ta'wil, which was used, commonly known and understood by Arabs, they don't even they don't call it reinterpretation. They basically accept it as a apparent meaning. All right? You'll find Ibn Abbas made ta'wil, many ta'wils. At-Tabari and all the Mufassirun, even the early ones, did ta'wil. Even Ahmad ibn Hanbal, those who they claim to be following him, he did ta'wil a lot as well. So, and directly, there's no way out of it. So it's basically whether to do ta'wil in all the ayahs, or some you can do ta'wil, others you can argue about, you can just better to leave that, and that this is basically the scope of the debate and argument among Ahl Sunnah. But to take it as a literal meaning that means body or means a body part, there's nobody from the Salaf said that. Salaf al-Salih. The only people who said that are the corporeal sect, al-Karramiyya, and those from hadith, some hadith scholars who didn't know Aqidah or anything. They basically just very narrow scope of knowledge in the hadith, and basically they took deniable hadith and basically used it to establish their Aqidah and so on. And nobody followed them. Basically, they were called out as corporealist. Some will say yad has a modality, but we cannot comprehend well, as I said, before getting to the modality, we even reject the meaning. Right? So there is no meaning. First of all, modality to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is inapplicable. Modality, kayf and ayn and meta, these are statements that describe a makhluk, a creation, not the creator. They are inapplicable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is a different story. Right. So, as I said, those of the Hanbali madhab of Ahl Hadith who were affected by al-Karramiyya, the corporealist sect, they were called out by the Hanbali scholars. One of the great Hanbali scholars, Ibn al-Jawzi, and he rebutted the corporeal belief of some Hanbali scholars in a great book. That book's called دفع شبهة التشبيه بأكف التنزيه, rebutting spurious arguments of corporealists through the power of glorifying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Ibn al-Jawzi died 597 Hijri, and basically at that time some of Hanbali scholars deviated from Ahmad ibn Hanbal, Imam Ahmad madhab, Aqidah, which is basically revolve around what we talked about just earlier, revolved around delegation of some ayat, where they cannot pin down exactly the meaning of based on the Arabic languages, and sometimes when it is clear, they do interpretation. There is no problem there. Okay. So some of Hanbali scholars got, as I said, got deviated and wrote books advancing the corporeal beliefs and anthropomorphisms, anthropomorphism, right? Tashbih. Anyway, and then basically he rebuts that in that book that we talked about, and that was before Ibn Taymiyyah. Okay, so he basically even addresses and rebutting Ibn Taymiyyah's madhab, Aqidah, the corporeal madhab, even before Ibn Taymiyyah was born. They were trying to purify and cleanse the Hanbali madhab from the corporeality of those scholars within the Hanbali madhab as a fiqh, who got basically influenced by al-Karramiyya and the corporeal madhabs. So anyway, I'm not going to talk about every single one of those. That's the book, and these are they are self-explanatory, and they are on my Facebook page. You can look at them. He just basically listed 7 reasons why those scholars basically fell in that deviated sect of Aqidah. And basically, one after another, he addresses that issue. And when you read this, you will even notice that those corporealists he was talking about were actually less corporealist than Ibn Taymiyyah and then those who are actually among us now claiming to be following the Salaf Aqidah. So you'll find some of these actually, they weren't that bad. They were bad for sure, but they weren't even that severely corporealist or affected as much as Ibn Taymiyyah. Ibn Taymiyyah dramatically increased it, repackaged all the false claims in a way that makes it difficult for anybody to understand and just basically go on with it and so on. It's very very astonishing how people are following that nonsense. So as I said, they are self-explanatory. I'm just gonna scroll one after another, so they are just in the video. You can refer to them later, and they are also on my Facebook page. Right. So now we are going to follow up with the speech, kalam. Right. So if you remember from what we talked about before, Ahl al-Sunnah distinguished between kalam, nafsi, self-speech, internal, intrinsic, like all that kind of explanation to it. Like there is no direct translation. I'm just trying to give you the meaning. And between the kalam that is basically spoken, that requires a tongue to articulate like put your tongue within. There's a tool basically for speech. It's the mouth, right? With your tongue, make articulation point, blowing air certain way so the sound goes out. Those sounds are linked together, produce words, and then those are understood and so on. So we talked about that in detail before, so I'm not gonna like repeat that. But basically, some evidence, some proof that Ahl al-Sunnah, Asha'ira, and the Maturidiyya relied upon to establish that speech, kalam, doesn't have necessarily just to be by letters and voice or sound. And one of the ayahs is أَلَمْ تَرَ إِلَى الَّذِينَ نُهُوا عَنِ النَّجْوَى. It's in Al-Mujadala, ayah number 8. And in this ayah, وَيَقُولُونَ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ, and they say in themselves. Now, some tafsir scholars translated or made tafsir to it, interpretation that they are talking among themselves, which is also like applicable in the meaning, but both meanings are applicable. It also means talking in themselves first, and even before talking among themselves and whispering about those bad deeds they are going to do and so on and so forth. Before talking among themselves and whispering, they actually talk within themselves first. You get the idea. Like, try to observe yourself before talking. Before talking, there is a meanings that would be established within yourself, and then you express them in basically in that speech, in that talk. Now, we don't say that exactly what happens with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't say that. We say Allah has an attribute called kalam. We don't know what it is, again. But by observing ourselves, we established without any shadow of doubt that kalam doesn't have necessarily to be spoken words. Okay, because spoken words are emergent, are hadith, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be like attribute with hadith. Otherwise, Allah becomes an hadith, becomes an emergent. You demolish the entire argument about necessary being, and basically there is no argument over atheists anymore. Right. Also hadith in al-Bukhari, in Muslim, Ibn Majah, in Ahmad. يقول الله تعالى أنا عند ظن عبدي بي وأنا معه إذا ذكرني فإن ذكرني في نفسي ذكرته في نفسي. If my servant remembered me and made remembrance to me in his within himself and in himself, I will mention him in myself. It's clear, right? So saying there is a kalam nafsi is not that like twisted kind of thing to try to just be clever and get out of the argument. No, it's basically very, very clear what we're talking about here. There is also a poem by a poet called al-Akhtal, and in this poem he say إن الكلام لفي الفؤاد. The speech is in the heart, is inside you. وإنما جعل اللسان على الفؤاد دليلا. But the tongue is just made to express what kalam is already inside the heart. So that's what he's saying. So basically, this demonstrates that Arabs also use the word kalam to refer to what is the meanings that are established inside even before you express them. Now, this is a poem by this al-Akhtal poet, as I said, and he is Arabic, and his speech or whatever he say is evidence, because he was before the period, or he was in the early periods where the Arab tongue was not yet twisted or whatever, so it was still hujjah, what we call hujjah. If somebody from the first couple of hundred years of Hijrah spoke something, it's still reflection of how the Arabs spoke. After that, because of the mixing with other nations and so on, the Arabic or the Arabs developed in a certain other way, basically disjointed from what the Arabs at the time of the revelation was speaking. However, some they say, no, this poem is not by the Akhtal, there is no evidence that is his, and so on and so forth. In any way, even if it is not al-Akhtal, this is not the only evidence that Ahl Sunnah used in order to establish that. It is actually al-Akhtal. It is because it is attributable to him. When we are dealing with, and this is something that you need to understand, when we are dealing with hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, yeah, we do the hadith sahih, da'if, we have like a rigorous way of defining it and so on and so forth. But for seerah, for example, we don't do necessarily that. We accept it, even if it is da'if, we accept it as a seerah. Okay? If it is widely known among linguistics that this is a Akhtal post or poem, that is enough. We don't need to have an isnad to him. It doesn't have to be in his diwan or whatever. It doesn't have. It is widely known already that it is for him. Done. This is how we deal with it. So trying to impose certain standard of hadith in other like scholarship or other subjects is wrong. You don't mix. Every scholarship or every subject has its own methodology and own way of establishing like their own way of evidence or proofs or whatever they use. Okay. So for example, if we applied the standard of hadith sahih on a seerah, then guess what? We don't have seerah. There is no seerah. So that standard is not applicable to it. It is not needed. So the seerah has a lot of da'if hadith, and they are accepted as seerah. Okay, now let's move on to some of the false invented rules that the corporealists like keep bringing up, and they are misleading their followers using those weird, convenient rules that they are just invent. We just said about the kalam, and the kalam could be nafsi, kalamun nafsi, or lafzi, spoken like word or intrinsic. They say no, that is not correct. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said وَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا. He add taklima. Taklima is basically what we call in Arabic masdar, which means, and basically they say, if you confirmed, it was added here as a confirmation because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said already وَكَلَّمَ Allah. Then if you said وَكَلَّمَ Allah Musa, done. Allah spoke to Musa. Adding taklima at the end doesn't add anything to the meaning or to the action. It just adds a confirmation. All right? And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala added a confirmation here, this is their invented rule. Then this means this kalam is haqiqi, kalam haqiqi, which is basically letters and voice, sound. So they say when something is confirmed by the masdar, that masdar, then it has to be taken in the literal and physical sense. Okay, so this is the rule. Who said this rule? Invented. Right, so this rule is incorrect. Why it is incorrect? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, Wallahu anbatakum min al-ardi nabata. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused you to grow from the earth like a plant. He also added nabata. Nabatan is masdar of anbatakum. And if we applied your rule, Ibn Taymiyyah, this means that we grow up from the earth like a tree. We just go up like that. Right? But that doesn't happen. Therefore, this rule is basically nonsense. Adding masdar, all what it does is adding a confirmation, but it doesn't necessarily mean it is physical sense or literal meaning. Also, وَتَأْكُلُونَ التُّرَاثَ أَكْلًا لَمًّا. وَتَأْكُلُون, you are eating. التُّراث is al-miras, inheritance. أكلا, again, أكلا is a masdar. وَقَضَيْنَا, but we don't eat the inheritance. When you inherit something, you don't eat it. Right? وَقَضَيْنَا إِلَى بَنِي إِسْرَائِيلَ فِي الْكِتَابِ لَتُفْسِدُنَّ فِي الْأَرْضِ مَرَّتَيْنِ وَلَا تَعْلُنَّ عُلُوًّا كَبِيرًا. This is to Bani Israel that they are going to be higher. عُلُوًّا. Again, this ulu is not physical sense. It's basically meaning like you have all control over others. Somebody is asking what would be the meaning of Sirah. Sirah is the biography of the Prophet, peace be upon him, his Sirah. All right? So the biography of anybody, you don't go through the whole process of the rigorous process that you go through to confirm the hadith al-sahih like in Bukhari, Muslim, and so on. So therefore, okay, so that was the first false invented rule. Okay, we're done with that. So adding that masdar to something, to a statement, doesn't convert it to mean physical sense of that. It's not. Okay, it's clear from the Quran. So they invent some rules and basically just use it in order to advance their ideas. Okay, the other rule they invented is very weird as well. Is basically saying that if you have hand, then only then it is applicable to be attributed or use an expression, majaz, a metaphor with hand. So in order to use a metaphor of hand, for example, or foot or whatever, if I'm going to use that metaphor to something, that something has to have a hand. Even if I'm using the word hand as a metaphor in that other statement or other context, as a secondary meaning, it affirms a hand. So basically that's what they're saying. So why are they trying to say that? They are trying to say that because of the ayah, and many ayahs, but just for example, surely those who pledge allegiance to you, O Prophet, are actually pledging allegiance to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah's hand is over theirs. This is basically when in Sulh al-Hudaybiyah, when the Sahaba pledged like to die for the Islam and so on and so forth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. But nobody ever saying that the meaning of this ayah is that basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his hand over their hands. No, it just means they actually are promising, not just promising you, Prophet, they are also promising Allah they will have to keep their promise and their allegiance, right? So that's what is meant by the ayah. So Allah's hand here doesn't mean that Allah has a hand. Okay? So basically this means what? This means, yeah, you can see here, this word used as an expression in the Quran, not to mean a hand, not to mean an attribute as a hand. It just means it's an expression, it's a metaphor. They say, no. You cannot use a metaphor unless Allah has a hand. So basically, we use that metaphor for us because we have a hand. If we didn't have a hand, then we couldn't have used a metaphor of hand. And therefore, Allah has a hand. Okay, so you understand what I'm trying to say? That's basically what they're trying to say. This is the rule. Um, so again, the ayah is clear. The ayah totally destroys their refusing of metaphor in Quran, refusing of majaz in Quran, refusing that the hand can come in Quran not to mean a hand. They admit it doesn't mean a hand here, but it can only used and to like add it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because Allah has a hand, has an attribute called a hand. Okay. But again, this is invented rule, it's incorrect. Ibn Taymiyyah says, as an example, you cannot find Arabs saying hand of era, yadu dahr. Dahr is a time era. They don't say yadu dahr because the dahr, the time, does not have a hand. And therefore, you cannot use yadu dahr as a metaphor. However, he actually missed that Arabs actually indeed use that metaphor. And already in the spoken language of the Arabs, well, even before Islam, they use that metaphor, no problem. Even though the dahr, the time, the era does not have a hand, they attribute a hand to it as a metaphor. They are saying, I don't do this matter in the hand of era, yadu dahr, meaning never. Okay, but he missed that. But put even that aside, even in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَيْنَ يَدَيْ عَذَابٍ شَدِيدٍ, within the hands of the punishment, a severe punishment. The punishment doesn't have a hand. And then it was okay to use a metaphor with using the word hand and attributing that or adding that to something that does not have a hand. Again, also, لا يأتيه الباطل من بين يديه ولا من خلفه. Al-batil does not come, this is basically talking about the Quran. Quran doesn't have a hand, right? Why can't, and it's basically used in a metaphor with hand without having a hand. So that rule, again, is basically invented rule just for convenience in order to advance their nonsense. Which shows you the selection. They are cherry picking ayah here, ayah there, forget about anything else, put it in some formal argument, advance it, and then go to the next, try to find whatever they can use and twist it in a way that advance their deviated beliefs. Okay, now let's move on to Allah's hand being a support of Allah. In this ayah, everybody agrees, consensus. It's just basically, does it mean even like anything other than, as I said, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when they are, because when you promise allegiance to somebody or pledge allegiance to someone back then, what happened in Sulh al-Hudaybiyah when Sayyidina Uthman went to Quraysh and then he didn't come back and there was a rumor that they killed him. Then the Sahaba and companions said, no, we cannot let that happen. We'll go there and punish them for what they did to Uthman radiallahu anh. And then there was a tree. The Prophet sat under this tree or stood under this tree, and they came one after another, 1,400 Sahabi, basically shaking hand was like that. We pledge like life or death. We'll get there to Mecca. We will punish them for what they have done to Uthman, and I'm with you. I'm not running away. I'm with you until I die or win over them. That's basically what they have done. When they did that, the ayah said, Yadullahi fawqa aydihim. The hand of Allah is over their hands, but Allah's hand was not over their hands. There's nothing like that. Allah doesn't have a hand. That's the whole point. The corporealists, those who believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand and face and all these kind of organs and body parts in the literal meaning. We as Ahl Sunnah, we say those words, they are expressions, or they are words for a sifat, for attributes, which we don't know what they are, what the meaning of, but they are not body parts. Okay? Anyway, so let's get now to the opposite of the necessary attributes. We talked about the necessary attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and now we are going to talk about that it is impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be attributed to the opposite of those what we confirmed. So like al-baqa, al-qidam, beginningless, eternal, knowledge, all knowing, all hearing, all those kind of attributes that we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the opposite of those attributes are impossible. So the Shaykh is saying here, وَيَسْتَحِيلُ ضِدُّ مَا تَقَدَّمَ مِنَ الصِّفَاتِ الشَّامِخَاتِ فَاعْلَمَا. It's impossible that the aforementioned divine attributes be negated from him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? Why? Because for if he were not attributed with them, then he would be known with similarity to creation. He will be known with similarity. He will have similarity with the creation. And any similarity with the creation in those attributes, meaning or will lead to that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not a necessary being, he is contingent. So what is the problem with that? I think we said that before many times, but just to remind you, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is possible being, not necessary being, and his existence is possible, and and he is emergent, that basically means, why do we need to affirm there is a God? The world, the universe could have just also emerged as well. You are saying that something could emerge from nothing, then the universe emerges from nothing. Bang, done. There is no religion. Atheist wins, right? And this basically destroys the argument. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلِلَّهِ الْحُجَّةُ الْبَالِغَةُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the most conclusive and superior argument, right? If that was not the case, then those atheists, when they are asked in Judgment Day, they say, okay, there was nothing for us to basically know for sure that you exist. And they would have basically get away with it. Okay? So the self attribute, the necessary existence, the 5 negating attributes, of 7 attributes of meaning, the existential attributes, all those are necessary for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, when we negate something, let's take a sidebar about this. This is important. Somebody might say, all right, we could, what is this? Why is it the case that when we deny that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-knowing, that will mean that the opposite of that is necessary for him? So if you said Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not knowing, what you are saying, what is the opposite of knowing? Ignorance. So we are saying Allah is ignorant, basically. So why is it? I might just say Allah is not knowing. I don't attribute a knowing to him. And I'm saying at the same time say, all right, but I don't say that he is ignorant. What we're trying to say here is, no, there is a necessary relation. There is a logical necessity between these two. If you affirmed knowledge, you have to directly, even if you didn't say it, that means you are negating ignorance. If you negated knowledge, you are affirming ignorance. So why is that the case, basically? So the Sheikh is saying, right, in negating, there are 4 different types of negating things. There is what we call an-naqidan, opposite. Okay? And this is affirming the existence of something versus its non-existence. Okay? So those are naqidan. If it is like saying someone is sitting down, not sitting down, they are the same thing, but you are affirming existence and non-existence of it. Okay? Somebody, he is he's moving and not moving at the same time. That can't happen. That's basically naqidan, what we call naqidan. If 2 things are opposite, naqidan, then they cannot happen together and they cannot be left together. So I cannot be moving and not moving at the same time, and I cannot also not be moving or not moving. You know what I mean? So I have to affirm one of them. I cannot be moving and at rest at the same time. And it's also impossible to describe me as not moving and not at rest at the same time. Those are naqidan. The other level, the other circle, or the other aspect is what we call ad-diddan, contradictory. two things that are contradictory to each other's. That happens when those two things are existential attributes. Okay? And also they are far disalike. They are not they are far disalike. They are not the same. And this is also important. Each can be understood without understanding the other. Okay? Like black and white. You can understand what black is. Okay? It's something that exists. You can see it. You know what is black. It exists in reality. You also know what white is. You don't need to understand black in order to understand white. They are far dislike. Those are the dawn. What happens? Something cannot be black and white at the same time, so they don't happen together. But they can be left together because it could be something else. It could be pink, could be green. Okay? So that's the difference between opposite and contradiction or contradictory. The sifat, the attributes that we talked about, they are something, and it's like it's existential, or something exists, and the opposite of it, which is not, doesn't exist. That's why they are naqidan. Okay. There are also two more types, what we call al-malaka wa adamaha. Al-malaka is the ability or skill. Malaka wa adamaha. Now you don't have to fully understand. All those are like I know, even especially if it is the first time to go through them, they are kind of a little bit complex. Maybe they need some time just to sit and you fully understand it. And in the like next courses, inshallah, we'll be building on those. We'll be repeating it. So just try to understand as much as you can of it, and see the recording after that and so on. But anyway, the third type of negating is al-malaka wa adamaha. That happens when there is an adjective or attribute that you expect something to be attributed with. It exists. Like, for example, sight and blindness. Sight is an attribute that has a place that it happens in, like the eye, for example. Okay? And you expect it to be there. The non-existence of it is blindness. Okay? So that's basically the ability wa adamaha. Now, why this is important? Because it's relevant to the things which you expect to be attributed with. So, for example, you can describe a dog, whether that dog can see, or is it a blind dog, for example. Okay? But you cannot describe a wall, this wall next to me here, or the door, or the camera I'm talking to you. Does it have a sight, or is it blind? Okay? Forget about the camera. Maybe the camera has sight somewhere, which is a majaz, but maybe, you know what I mean. The mobile, is a mobile has a sight or not? So those kind of attributes, they are only relevant or can be described for certain instances, but not for everything. Okay. The al-mutadayifan, interrelated, they are existential attributes that they are far disalike as well, like the contradictory. And each, but here is the difference. Each cannot be understood without understanding the other. They are interrelated. That's why they are called interrelated, like parenthood and filiation of children. So ubuwa and bunuwa. I am a father, or I am a son, right? So this is my relation to my father, and my father is my dad. So there are these two relations. They are opposite to each other, but they exist together because they are interrelated. They are different. They are not like the naqidan, for example, not like the opposite. Okay. This is important because you'll find somebody say, all right, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in the world or outside of the world. Otherwise, he doesn't exist. You tell him, no, you don't understand. You haven't learned the basics of aqidah, or basically even like sense. Not everything can be attributed with everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be attributed with in the world or outside of the world. It's just not applicable to him. These are not opposite. They are ability and disability, and these are not something that within the divine attribute. Okay. Opposite of necessary attributes are impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay, continuing. So basically, remember all those 13 or 20 attributes that we affirmed. We need to negate, or you need to understand that the opposite of those are negated. So, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like the non-existence is not is wrong. Negating non-existence is basically the opposite of everything that we attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is impossible for Allah to be non-existence. It is impossible for Allah to be emergent. It is impossible for Allah to that the non-existence occur to him. Okay, and so on. You'll find all these are the opposite of all the other attributes we have been talking about since we started. It is impossible for Allah to be ignorant or lack of knowledge, whether that's simple or complex ignorance. And the complex ignorance is a case where somebody doesn't know, and he doesn't know, or they don't know that they don't know. This is what we call a complex case of ignorance. So, for example, you don't know something. You don't know surgery. I don't know surgery. I know that I don't know surgery. All right. So that's basically a simple kind of ignorance. But maybe somebody knows or think he knows something, like those corporealists who keep like talking and claim they know, but in reality they actually don't know anything about what we're talking about here. All right. So basically, again, everything that we affirm to Allah, the opposite of that is inapplicable or denied. And then the Sheikh saying, وَكُلُّ مَنْ قَامَ بِهِ سِوَاهَا فَهُوَ الَّذِي فِي الْفَقْرِ قَدْ تَنَاهَى. That's an overall proof why those are deniable on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because anybody or anything that is attributable with any one of those 13 things that we just listed, this will lead to that essence, or that thing that has such an attributes is basically contingent and needs in need of something else. Okay, like for example, they say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is above, like literally in a sense he is over. That's basically affirming a direction, affirming a place to Allah, which means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala requires that place to exist. He needs that place. It's basically you are affirming Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is contingent upon something. Okay. والواحد المعبود لا يفتقر لغيره جل الغني المقتدر. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who is worthy of worship, cannot be contingent, is not contingent upon anything else. Glorified he, the independent, the powerful. لغيره جل الغني المقتدر. Okay. Now, so what is possible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It is possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as the Sheikh says, وَجَائِزٌ فِي حَقِّهِ الْإِيجَادُ وَالتَّرْكُ وَالْإِشْقَاءُ وَالْإِسْعَادُ. It is possible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at his discretion to bring anything to existence, to create. Ijad means creation of something, or leaving it non-existent. Create tribulation, ishqa, or create pleasure, is'ad. Okay? So he can make somebody miserable, he can make somebody happy. Allah, as at his own discretion. Okay? That's possible. Okay, so as we talked before about the relations, the power, qudra, has a relation with something, it brings it into existence. That is basically the Asha'ira school of thought. Maturidiyya add another attribute called takween, and they have a different definition. It all basically goes to the definition. The definition of qudra is different, which is a different story. We don't need to go to now. But the point is, for al-Asha'ira, establishing that relation with the qudra, with the attribute of qudra, of power, when it is established with giving life or with life, it's called giving life. When it's establishing with giving rizq, it's called tarziq, and so on. Okay, as we said, the Maturidi school affirm its attribute called takween. And all those relations are non-existential, okay? They are اعتبارية, abstract. They are something in the dhihn, in the mind. So that you understand. But there is nothing that emerge within Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is not befitting to Allah. Now, the Shaykh goes on to rebut some of the Mu'tazila. The Shaykh is saying, وَمَنْ يَقُلْ فِعْلُ الصَّلَاحِ وَجَبَ عَلَى الْإِلَهِ قَدْ أَسَاءَ الْأَدَبَ. So he is basically now addressing one of the principles of Mu'tazila, which they are saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obligated to do the best for his creation. And within Mu'tazila, actually, it is not just one opinion. They have different opinion. Some of them has two extreme, like take that two extremes side. Some of them have a less kind of extreme definition of that principle and so on. But the Sheikh here is rebutting that, like in general, and saying that if you say that it is obligation on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do something, like what we talk here, we said, what did we say? We say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at his discretion, it is جائز في حقه, whether he can do this or he wants to do this or that. He can do ishqa, is'ad. He can make somebody miserable, he can make somebody not miserable. It's at his own discretion. They say no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has to do what is best for everybody. Okay, so that's the argument. So he's saying, if you say that, that's basically a bad manners. You are exhibiting bad manners and disrespect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Somebody is asking, what is the difference between kalam, nafsi, and knowledge? Brother, we talked about that already in previous lessons. Refer to the recordings. Right, rebutting al-Mu'tazila. Okay, so basically we are continuing in the obligation of doing the best. It's basically Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at his discretion, at his favor. Not that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala obligated to do something to you. He could have created you and not giving you something to eat and let you just suffer. He basically it's a favor for him to do that to you. Right. But from another aspect, from his knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and his promise that if you do well, you go to Jannah, then it becomes a must. It becomes not an obligation, but it's going to happen. Okay, so you need to differentiate between whether, in a sense, it's probably more of being polite with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala more than anything else, because nobody saying that, for example, us now, if someone believed in Allah and did everything well, not did any sense whatsoever, you cannot say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to send him to hellfire and basically let him be miserable. No, that is not the case. It is not because it's obligatory on Allah, it's because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, I will do that. Okay, he promised, do well, you will enter Jannah, do bad, you will go to hell. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't lie is not befitting to Allah, is impossible for Allah, lying. Therefore, this is going to happen. Okay, Mu'tazila is saying no, it has to happen because it's obligation on Allah. We say no, it will have to happen, and it will has to happen because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised and said he will do that. Okay, that's the difference. That's the difference. All right, and there is a debate happened between Abu al-Hasan al-Ash'ari and Abu Ali al-Jubba'i, his teacher. He was also his stepdad. So Abu al-Hasan is asking Abu Ali al-Jubba'i, and Abu Ali al-Jubba'i, one of those Mu'tazila who believe in the extreme side of the obligation that Allah has to do the extreme case of it. Okay, so he's asking him, imagine three brothers. The older died at the state of pious. He was basically a believer and died as a believer. The second one, the other, died non-believer. And the youngest died as a child. What will happen to them? He said, the first one must be rewarded in paradise. Again, must. It's an obligation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to to send him to paradise. The second will be punished in hellfire. He must go to hell, because it's obligation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for those who didn't believe in him, that they have to go to hell. The third there is nothing must on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to do. There is no reward, no punishment necessarily, because he didn't do either. So Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari said, or told him, all right, so why is that the case? The youngest brother, or who has no reward, no punishment, will say to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why did you kill me, or let me die young? I would have, why didn't you let me live? I could have become a mu'min, become a believer, and go to heaven. So that's the question that Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari telling his teacher at that time, from Mu'tazila, Abu Ali al-Jubai. Abu Ali al-Jubai said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will answer him, telling him, I knew, or from my knowledge, I know that had you not died as a child, you'd have been non-believer, and you would have gone to hellfire. Because of that, I let you die earlier, before that time, so that you don't go to hellfire. I did the better for you, the best for you. Then Abu Hassan al-Ash'ari said, okay, so what about the second one who went to hellfire? He would say, Allah, so why didn't you make me die before I, like my youngest brother, so that I also don't go to hell? And Abu Ali al-Jubai couldn't answer. There is no answer for it. Done. Okay? I hope this is clear. If not, then maybe you just see the recording again. But basically, that's the argument. Three brothers, same situation. One believer to heaven, one not believer to hell. The other one was died as a child. Why didn't Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala let the third child, or that third person, become an adult and become a believer? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knew that he would become non-believer, so he killed him earlier, before that. If that is the case, and if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is obligated, there is an obligation for Allah to do the best for his creation, he should have done the same with the second child. So basically, it's a hypothetical situation to demonstrate that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not obligated to do that. It is at his own discretion. Okay? The other thing about Mu'tazila as well, which is also possible, we are in the possible section of the poem, is that we, inshallah, we will see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَجْزِمْ أَخِي بِرُؤْيَةِ الْإِلَهِ فِي جَنَّةِ الْخُلْدِ بِلَا تَنَاهِ. Meaning, affirm and strongly know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala may be seen in paradise in the infinite, like Jannat al-Khuld, because paradise, inshallah, there is no ending to it. Okay? So, ru'yat Allah, seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hereafter, in paradise, is not impossible. The Sheikh is also saying, إِذِ الْوُقُوعُ جَائِزٌ بِالْعَقْلِ وَقَدْ أَتَى بِهِ دَلِيلُ الدَّقْلِ. Since seeing him subhanahu wa ta'ala is rationally possible, like rationally from the three categories where we said impossible, possible, and necessary, seeing Allah is possible and is evident by revelation proofs. And this is the Ahl Sunnah way. If something is not like is possible, and then we find confirmed, like sahih evidence of Sunnah or Quran and so on, that this is going to happen, we say it will happen. We believe in it. A nice nice point here. The Sheikh said, what did the Sheikh say? He said, "Wajizim akhi, O brother." And then in his explanation, he says, Muslims are brothers because the Father who guided them out of darkness to light of belief is the same, which is the Prophet, peace be upon him. So we are all brothers in a sense that the Prophet is our father in guiding us out of al-kufr. If it wasn't for the Prophet, peace be upon him, know for sure you would not have been a Muslim. There is no question about it. Okay? You are a Muslim, alhamdulillah, because of the Prophet. All right. Also, the sight conditions in this life are a matter of physical limitations and worldly prerequisites, which can be lifted anytime. Okay. So those conditions we have in, like, exactly what, like with the speech, the seeing of Allah is not like an object, like seeing an object, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not an object, like it's not a body. It's not like seeing something with reflection, and it has to be within a certain distance from you and so on. All those kind of prerequisites and conditions for you, they are in this life. They can be lifted. The real sight, the definition of sight, what it is basically a creation Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create in your eyes. That's what it is, because you can be sleeping and you can still see. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was able to see from his back, even though that his eyes are in front. He didn't have like back eyes, but he could see from his back. And this is Sahih Bukhari, and so many other like it's basically a Sahih characteristic of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and so many other things that demonstrate as well that he wasn't just like any one of us. So he could see from the backside. So all those kind of conditions are not necessary. So in paradise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will create in us. Some will say it will be created in our eyes, the paradise eyes. Some will say it's going to be created in our hearts, our soul. Some saying it's going to be created in our entire body, so you can see with your entire body. Okay, Allah alam which one is going to be, but basically we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will see him inshallah. Okay, because of the ayah is clear. وجوه يومئذ ناظرة إلى ربها ناظرة, looking at their Lord. Al-Mu'tazila saying ناظرة here meaning waiting for the good rewards and so on and so forth. Okay, so they take the word and make ta'wil or understand it differently in different meaning. This is where we have different opinions about it. Okay, but Ahl Sunnah, we affirm the seeing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise. Of course, corporealists affirm seeing him, but seeing him in a direction like how you see in this life. You see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like that, which is mustahil, impossible for Allah. They are also saying, we believe as well, the amount of time or amount of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or seeing him, that bless and that reward differs from one to another in the amount of time that you will be seeing him, in the pleasure that you will feel out of it, on how what it is going to be exactly in you. It's everybody's going to be different depending on how much they will attach to Allah in this life and watching him in this life. Okay, some awliya will be basically seeing Allah all the time during the Jannah. So there will be no hijab, no cover to, meaning that creation of seeing is going to be all the time. Others is going to be given to them intermittently, like in different times for certain point of time, depending on how well they were in this life. It's going to happen, inshallah, to men, women, children, human, jinn, everyone in paradise, inshallah. وجعلنا الله منهم يا رب. The logical proof of that is, if I have an object and I am moving it like that, okay, I don't have any object here now, but a pen, if I'm moving it, you see the movement, okay? When it is at rest, you still see it at rest. The only thing common between this movement at rest is that it exists. So just by existence, you are able to see it. So that kind of knowing and realization is going to happen to anything that exists. And because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists, then it is possible to see him. Okay? From Quran, Sayyidina Musa he asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to see him. If that was not befitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if that was impossible to Allah, this would have been a great and grave mistake from Sayyidina Musa. And al-anbiya ma'sumin, as we are going to see, they cannot do those kind of bad things. Moses cannot ask Allah, can you create another God with you? It's impossible. If he said that, that's shirk. You can't, right? This is not befitting for a prophet to say. So if seeing Allah was the same, also impossible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or for Allah, Sayyidina Musa wouldn't have asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Okay? It would have been a great sin or grave mistake to ask Allah. And also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a condition, like a possible condition, which is, I think is clear, and there's no point of getting more into it. We don't have time. And what in the Quran, Al-Mu'tazila rely on some ayah in the Quran, but what this ayah denies is basically that you encompass Allah. And that cannot happen for sure, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not limited in an area. But not the mere realization of sight. That is not denied. What is denied in Quran is ihata, fully realizing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and fully encompassing Allah. You cannot. Our minds cannot comprehend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for sure. Not his essence, not anything. So yeah, that's the end of this lesson, alhamdulillah. I think we addressed all the questions as we were moving along or getting along with the lesson. So I don't see any other questions. Are there any other questions before we end up? Sorry, the question, what's the difference between kalam nafsi and knowledge? I apologize, brother. I thought you were asking about seeing and sight and kalam nafsi. Yeah, no, I think you are right. We didn't perhaps talk much about that, but it's the same concept as the seeing and hearing are some sort type of knowledge, but they differ. How they differ, we don't know, but we affirm them because Al-Quran came with affirming them, and they are not impossible for Allah. And the opposite of them are not befitting to Allah. So therefore, we affirm them. The same point, kalam nafsi, they are not the knowledge, because you could know. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything, right? And we talked about that. We said kalam nafsi and knowledge, they also have relation with the impossible, possible, and necessary. But the meaning of kalam is different from knowledge. Okay, and again, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it and affirmed it, we also affirming it. There is nobody saying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have speech, doesn't have kalam. The issue is whether Allah's kalam is created or not created. Okay, but as we are going to see next lesson, inshallah, there must be kalam of Allah. Otherwise, sending prophets or sending messengers cannot happen. Okay, we're going to talk about that next time, inshallah. So maybe that adds more context to this point. Is there anything else? Everybody is a scholar. No questions. Great. جعلنا الله وإياكم متحققين بطلب العلم النافع. Right. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما واجعلنا من علمائك العاملين الهادين المهتدين واهد بنا يا رب العالمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وسلم تسليما كثيرا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.